say here in presenting and facilitating the next version of the series of the SME resilience webinars, and thrilled to have a recovery to resilience session by the Nebraska DOT director. We'll get to that in a minute, and but just want to go over a few. This is a continuation of the SME resilience webinar series, a few housekeeping items that you can see there on your screen. And as Bell mentioned here on the chat line, you can feel free to please type in any questions, and we'll get to them at the end. And a few agenda topics. Again, I'm Tony Basay. I'm a member of the SME Resilience Community of Interest on behalf of Joe Manus. And today we're going to be talking about something here I know on the East Coast where I am, something that didn't get a lot of press. Back in the spring, Nebraska went through a horrific flood event. They're actually still dealing with it, and we're thrilled to have the director there. But a couple admin things. You do get one PDH credit, and it will be sent to the email that you registered on. And then we'll conclude with some remarks at the end, JETC events and all that, and Bell will talk about that in a few minutes. So without any further ado, I just want to get to talk about Kyle a little bit. And Kyle is, and he can talk about his fun facts there a little bit, but Kyle is the current director of the Nebraska DOT. Prior to that, he was in private sector, worked for a firm, High Street, back in DC. Before that, he was with the Kansas Department of Transportation, and currently serves at the pleasure of Governor Pete Ricketts. And this June, he'll be there for 5 years. And so I know what he's going through now is probably not what he signed up for. And he'll definitely bring that home to you in some graphics and some pictures here in a few minutes. So without any further ado, I want to turn it over to Mr. Kyle Schneweis, the Nebraska Department of Transportation's director. Kyle, over to you.
Hey, Tony, thank you. And thank everybody for having me today. It says there I am an Air Force brat. I can certainly envision a different life of my own where I could be on the military side of things, and have a lot of respect for those of you in the military and the work that you do and the kind of service that you provide to the public. And Tony, as you mentioned, with being here 5 years, we're kind of doing our thing. We're building our projects. We're taking care of our roads and trying to modernize our business and get more customer focused and trying to lead an organization, all those things. And then one day you kind of wake up and you realize that today's a different day, and the thing that you're going to be working on from now until the foreseeable future is different than what you thought yesterday. And it will define you. It'll define the administration. It'll define sort of how people look back on your record as a director. And I think when you're in these positions, sometimes you got to be ready for it. And then you when it finally shows up, you think, okay, here we go. And so I'm going to try and give you a little bit of picture of what it was like and some of the things we're trying to still do to recover and some of the challenges that we have. So a little bit of context in here. I think I advanced a little bit too fast there. Last winter, we had a pretty rough winter in Nebraska. It was very cold for several weeks in a row where we didn't get above freezing, and we had storm after storm after storm. We averaged a couple examples here. We averaged about $25 million a year in snow and ice removal for our state, and we spent $46 million last year in snow and ice. That gives you a sense of the kind of winter. We had over 50 inches of snow, which is well over what we typically see. And it seemed like all the storms, they kept coming on weekends. And so our team, all the folks that are out there in the districts who are in charge of moving snow and ice and those things, I mean, some of those guys didn't get a day off for 7 weeks in a row. They just, every day they had to be out there in the plows. And so it was getting to be a grind, and we were getting pretty wore down as an organization and really could not wait for spring. And we probably prayed a little too hard for spring, because when we got to spring, it came all at one time. This is a picture of the storm that occurred, and Nebraska is right up there underneath the purple piece. And they call this a bomb cyclone, which was not a word that I was familiar with. But what ended up happening was we got a bunch of rain all at one time, and it sort of warmed up a little bit all at one time, but the ground was still frozen. And so all the snow in the state melted all at one time. And because the ground was frozen, there was no place for it to go. And so we ended up getting a significant amount of flooding throughout most of our state. Here's just another shot of the weather storm that occurred that day and the winds of just how massive this thing was. This next shot is from our 511 website, which if you haven't ever been to yours in your state, I recommend it. Most state DOTs run a very good website that tells you where roads are closed and where there are issues. All of that red is where we had roads closed due to flooding. All told, it was 3,300 miles of our 10,000 that we managed. So 1 out of every 3 miles that we managed at DOT was closed all at the same time. 27 bridges in addition to the 3,300 miles were closed. We had so many roads closed, we ran out of barricades. And so in order to keep people out of flooded waters, we actually had our crews out there in trucks, and many of them were sleeping in the truck trying to keep people safe. And, 40, 50, 60-hour shifts where they're just sitting out there in their truck trying to turn people away. And, when you use the word resilient, one of the things when you're dealing with something like this, you need resilient people. You need employees who are ready to do what it takes to keep people safe. And so, resilient can mean a lot of things to different people. But for me, one of the things that proved this whole event proved is just how resilient our team is. And of course, you kind of know that when you get to know the people at DOT and work in the public sector. They work because of the passion for the mission. But man, it really came home those early days when we had so many roads closed at one time. I'm going to show you some pictures of some of the damage, and won't get too detailed into it, but I'll just use it as kind of a backdrop as I talk about some of the things that happened over the course of the next few weeks and months. So here's a typical picture. The river's probably only a few hundred feet wide normally, and here it is. You can't even see to the other side. This one is very interesting. So the channel here on 281, this is south of the Spencer Dam. The channel is where that bridge is up on the north, on the top of that picture. That is the typical channel. It's a few hundred feet long. That bridge is about 650 feet long, and that bridge actually didn't sustain much damage. But when the dam broke, the channel completely moved, and now the channel is 1,800 feet wide there, and it just took the road. That what it took out there was not a bridge; it just took out the road when it moved. You can see, and I've got another picture of this, but up on the bridge there on the north side, on the top of the picture, and on the bank by those trees, those are giant ice chunks that you'll see more pictures of here in a minute. Here's another example. This is actually in just outside of Omaha. It's not obviously in urban Omaha, but it's just outside. And it's a good example where the team, you got to wait for the water to go down to kind of see what kind of damage you're going to have. And sometimes our folks were surprised. They would have thought that we would have damage on one set of lanes, but ended up because of the way that the water was moving, we maybe had damage in a different place. And so sometimes you're surprised that, hey, there's actually no damage when the water finally goes away. And other times it's way worse than you would have thought. And part of the resilient piece for me is being flexible and be able to react to whatever happens when it's over. And you can't assume too much, especially when you're talking about a storm of this size. So you just got to kind of wait and be ready to go and be able to react. This is another picture, this next one, of the dam from the other side. So the last one I showed you was from the other side. And now you can start to see some of those ice chunks that are up on the bridge there, how big they are. Another shot again. One of the things about this storm and and what we were dealing with, we're pretty good at dealing with a bridge being out because of flooding or a roadway being out. It's something that occurs every spring. Usually it's so isolated. The challenge here is that this is happening everywhere all at one time. And so for a DOT, you're not organized necessarily, or you don't have the resources to be able to kind of address this massive event all at one time. It's such a monumental task, and not knowing where you're going to need your people. I took this next picture from a helicopter when we were touring the damage, and you can just see how much bigger the channel is. And usually it's just right underneath that bridge. And here the bridge actually held up pretty good. Obviously the approaches are gone. There was a 25-foot scour hole underneath this bridge, though, that needed to be repaired, and that caused a lot of the problem. You can see the water, how it's moving there. But this just gives you a sense of how massive the storm was, how much water you're dealing with, when normally that bridge goes right over the channel, but here you can even see the water on the other side to the top of that picture on the left. Just how much water we're dealing with. We had examples of bridges like this, where at one time they were completely overtopped with water. This one actually had a bunch of corn stalks from cornfields on top of it, and that load is what ended up causing this bridge to fail. Luckily, we didn't have anyone on the bridge at the time, and the corn stalks have been cleared off. But you can see just the different kinds of challenges. Sometimes the bridge holds up, sometimes it's the approaches, sometimes the bridge completely fails. And when you got 27 of these, trying to figure out how to handle them and how to have a quick response is the challenge. It's not just one bridge, it's 27. Here's a picture of the Spencer Dam. We had a few fatalities in Nebraska as a result of the flooding. This was one of them. There was a home here just on this side of the dam. And when it broke, right before it broke, the folks who worked at the dam had gone down to the homeowner and said, hey, you need to get out of here. We think the dam may fail. And it was just a few minutes after that when that actually did occur, and it ended up taking that home. There's no remnants of the home, and I don't believe they ever found the gentleman who had lived there at the time. That was one of the more sad stories of the event. Yeah, here's another one again. Unique solutions. Sometimes can you save the bridge or not? And is it cost effective or not? How does time play into it when you're trying to get these things open fast? How long are the detours? How does it affect people? And when you've got one of those, that's a big enough challenge trying to figure out and sort through. But when you're doing it for 27 bridges at one time and about 200 miles of pavement, that's where the challenge starts to come in. Here's another one. This one's outside of Omaha as well. One of the things, as the water recedes and you come up on this, obviously this needs some major repairs. A lot of times we when those 3,300 miles cleared up, we were able to just clear debris and then say, okay, we think we can open this road. But every time you have to assess it and make sure it's safe for the people. And so that was a massive undertaking once all the water recedes, to go out and assess and see what needs to be done. Maybe there's some quick little repairs we can do to get the road open quickly. We were able to do a lot of those repairs ourselves initially. And then we have a great contracting community here in Nebraska that was obviously eager to help. And so in some cases, we had them out doing quick work right away to get some of the easier solutions implemented. And one of the things about being resilient, being able to respond to this kind of thing, it is that partnership piece with the contracting industry, the consultant industry, the regulatory groups. You got to have those partnerships. And if you don't have them when it starts, you're going to have a problem. And so, it's really important that we're all working together. We understand our roles. And so when these kind of things pop up, we can work together to solve the problems. Because if you don't have those partnerships, being able to be resilient as a collective group is going to be stretched and challenged. There's another one. One of the things that I learned along the way is, especially with how widespread the damage is, you really got to let folks do their thing. And we have 8 districts in Nebraska. 6 of the districts were affected in major ways. And those district engineers, those folks on the ground, you got to let them make decisions. And they won't always make the decision that maybe collectively you would have made if you could collectively make them all. But you got to let them do their thing. Part of being able to respond and to be resilient is you got to let the folks who have the best information that they have to make those decisions. So, and that's everything from when to open, to how to solve the quick problems. And there was definitely, things we would do different if you were to go back and assess every single situation. But ultimately, when you're trying to respond, you're trying to get these things open as best you can, you got to let the folks on the ground just do their job. And you got to have trust and faith in them, and you got to back them up if maybe they don't make the decision that you wish they would have made, because they're dealing with total chaos. And so that was one thing that I would suggest to anybody is, let the folks at the lowest level make those decisions and go and kind of deal with any issues later, because the people of the state will be served better by doing that. One of the biggest challenges that we had is communications and collection of data. That was a huge challenge, especially for someone in my position, because I'm doing a lot of media interviews and a lot of communications with the governor's office, with the adjutant general and the National Guard, the the emergency management folks. And information is so valuable. And when you've got so many roads and bridges out, knowing what the status of those are and being able to collect that information and get it summed up in a way that we can get out to people was a huge, huge challenge. And I think that one of the lessons that we've learned along the way is we've got to have a better way to do that, a better clearinghouse for information. And that was something that we really struggled with early on, especially, is just what's a rumor, what's a fact, and when you look at the big picture, what does it look like? And rumors were a challenge. You know, there's a lot of people talking in social media and a lot of those kinds of things that ends up just not being very true. And so that's one of the roles, I think, for us in government and the public sector is, you know, we got to be able to be that source of truth. And so collecting the information and knowing what's right and not jumping on things that aren't true. And, you know, I would get calls from even the governor saying, hey, I heard, you know, this has happened where, you know, our folks are saying that, you know, they're not going to ever repair the bridge, or those kinds of things that just get people real fired up real fast. And trying to get everybody to stay calm and focus on what we know is a huge challenge in an event like this. And everybody wants answers. They all want to know, you know, what's the plan? What happened? And sometimes it just takes time to be able to gather all that information. You got to be careful that you're not helping to spread some of the things that maybe aren't exactly true. This next picture gives you a sense of some of the ice. Those are just big blocks of ice sitting on that bridge. I believe this bridge actually held up pretty good. It moved off its foundation about 1.5 feet, I think. And we were actually able to save this thing and just picked it up and moved it back, which is quite a project in itself. This is a picture of the bridge after we got the ice off the bridge. You can still see it, and that's why it moved, because all that ice coming down the water, coming down the river is quite the force, and just moved the bridge off its bearings. I think that's the last of some of the damage pictures. I took this photo Monday morning. It was March 18th, so the event happened on the 14th. We spent the weekend trying to respond and just keep people safe. We show up, I think it's about 8:30 Monday morning in our executive conference room. We kind of ran out of chairs there. A lot of folks. We got IT people here, bridge experts, road experts, communication people, operations people, and we're just trying to get a sense of where do we start. And this is a memorable photo for me, because, you know, you realize just how much we don't know, what we do know, and how are we going to try to figure out where to start with this thing. You can see the pictures up behind. Mark is running the computer there. He's our state bridge engineer, and he was trying to sort of collect as much information as he could early. Actually, we're using, in some cases, we were getting footage from citizens who were either flying drones and putting things up on YouTube, and that was the interesting thing, that you could actually, in some cases, assess the damage of your own system better just by getting out there and seeing what some of the citizens are out taking pictures of. And so some of the things we learned that morning were really just because we had access to some of that stuff just by following the news and following people on social media, which is kind of an interesting thing to admit, right? That some of those citizens who maybe we wish weren't out there were actually helping us to understand where our biggest problems were. Here as we go, I've used these numbers a little bit today already. So we had about 85 projects total when all the water was gone. We were trying to figure out what to do. We assessed that we had about 85 projects, and 27 of the bridges had to be fixed, and we had 200 miles of pavement after it was all done. So the 3,300 that we started with closed, only 200 of those actually required repairs. The biggest, there's a lot of people to thank when it comes to trying to do this. I mean, our annual construction budget is about $500 million, and you know, we do about 100 projects a year. So all of a sudden, overnight, you just doubled your program size in terms of the number of projects. How are you going to get that accomplished? The contractors were a huge piece of our success here. The ability of them to step up to work with us and other clients that they had to prioritize where to start, where to put their resources, I can't overemphasize how important those folks were. And you know, a lot of them are Nebraska companies. You know, they want to help. They want to be part of a good story and help the state recover. And so those contractors, those relationships were very important. On the engineering side, you know, the consultants, we can't design 85 projects overnight ourselves. And so getting the consultant engineers fired up and I mean, the amazing work they did. We had folks that were putting out bridge plans in 3 weeks, 4 weeks. You know, that's typically a year-long or more process. And so these weren't the greatest plans in the world. I mean, they weren't down to the you know, the second decimal. We were trying to get something that a contractor could work with, and a lot of long hours by those folks. And again, Nebraska companies, a lot of them, and really a lot of pride that they showed to be able to step up and help us get there. Here's the damage number, and this was a number. I mean, it's still moving. Here we are, almost a year from the event, and this number continues to go up and down as we get through the projects. And in the beginning, this number was as high as 400 million because we were kind of assuming the worst in some places where the water hadn't yet receded. But ultimately, about $127 million in damage to the state system. The local roads had another 46. This is just, if you know much about the transportation system and how it's organized, when I say local, I'm talking cities and counties. Each city and county usually has some roads that are part of the federal aid system. And it's usually about 25% of their system is federal aid eligible. This is just damage on those roads. So it's usually your you know, if you're a county, it's your maybe your blacktop roads, the ones that really help connect the county together. While you may have another county road every mile, those roads are not included in this damage number and actually aren't something that we have much to do with. FEMA is the place that folks go for that number and help on those. And that's actually a place where there's lots of confusion, because if you're a county official, maybe you're new to the board, you don't know that there's some roads that are federal aid eligible through federal highway and some roads that aren't. And of course, we're out there pretty quick. We've got folks in the districts. We can get out there and help assess damage on those roads. And so the communication out of Lincoln around the state to locals was very quick and very helpful. But for most of their damage, it's not a road that's in our jurisdiction. And so it caused a lot of confusion. I think one of the things we need to try to understand, not only here in Nebraska, but as a country, is when it comes to response of these things, you know, you've got different jurisdictions, and federal highway is a jurisdiction on some of this, and FEMA is a jurisdiction on in other places. And the response times and the things you need to be able to get reimbursed and the rules are different. And so I don't think they need to be necessarily aligned, but if you're a county official, it can be very confusing. And so what can we do as the state or on the federal side to better get more information in the hands of people when this occurs, so that they can just understand the timelines, understand the different requirements at a very high level, because the uncertainty that they face and that they feel can really hamper our ability to make decisions and get things done. And you know, people need to have confidence in what's going to happen next, and that was something that was in some cases missing. I do have to speak very highly for a second of our partners at Federal Highway. The folks here in our local division office, I mean, they were right there with us from the very beginning. They recognize this is not your normal event. When you're dealing with emergency relief, usually it's one or two projects, one or two bridges. The scale of this required a different approach, and they understood that right from the beginning, and were right there with us to help us make decisions faster than I think anyone could have ever hoped. And I have to give them credit, because, you know, when you're on the regulatory side, if you're at Federal Highway, you know, that's a little bit of a risk, and risks aren't something that I think we always see on that regulatory side. But they were willing to take some calculated risks to help us respond to serve the people, and I just can't thank them enough for that philosophy that they employed and the partnership that they showed us along the way. One of the things that we did early, and I stress this a lot, because we right away, I mean, in the first 2 weeks, we went out and held some public meetings in the towns where there was the most damage, and it was really important. The guy talking there is from the emergency management group. the guy on the right up front, that's our Federal Highway Division Administrator. He went on to these meetings with us, and we have some of our district people there, and our engineering community was there too. And these were very emotional meetings. I mean, tears were shed by both sides, citizens, by us, trying to just understand what we were dealing with and help, and it helped to sort of share those hugs and those tears. And it's not something you really think about when you think of, a bureaucrat from Lincoln coming to your town, that we were having such an emotional meeting, but they really were, and they were important. One thing that these did is they helped us to make decisions. When you go out and spend time in the community and you understand what it means to a town to have, the bridge into their town is now out at 70 miles to get around. And in some rural parts of Nebraska, that's the kind of detour you're talking, is an hour or more long detour. You got farmers who live on one side of the bridge, and their fields are on the other side, and it's an hour away to get there. And these kinds of things, schools on one side and students on the other, we heard about all this stuff. And so, it helps you make a decision because it helps you focus on, do we need to focus on something temporary or permanent, or how important is speed here compared to maybe some of the other places we're facing challenges. But also, these meetings are so memorable. When you're trying to get through the hard part, you're a bridge engineer who's got to put plans out in 3 weeks, and it's tough. You think back to these meetings, you remember these people, and this is who we are working for. And so having those meetings was an important piece to put that really front and center. And it was something we talked a lot about at DOT, and there were decisions that were made as a direct result of some of these conversations that we were able to have. Just a stat, so within 30 days, we had most of the highways open. Now, 99% sounds pretty good, but that still left the 27 bridges, and that still left over 200 miles of pavement that was damaged. But amazing accomplishment to get that debris cleared, to get those quick repairs in place. I mentioned, allowing the district engineers to just do their thing. Federal Highway Administration, again, being so supportive to let us make these decisions quick and then sort of deal with all the factors afterwards. As of today, we have all the highway miles are open, and we have one bridge to go. If we have this webinar in a week, I think I might be able to report that we have all of them. Well, the last one is, we're just waiting on weather, and we'll be able to get that thing open, waiting for the concrete to cure. So, we're 10 months from the event or so, and we've got almost the entire system back open. So quite an accomplishment from the folks at DOT and contractors and everybody else. This is the Spencer Dam one again. So this is where that channel moved. And I wanted to talk a little bit about it. When we first were talking about this project, we had an estimate in mind. We actually left the project construction, and our estimate was around $25 million, I believe, somewhere in there. And we got one bid, and it was about $81 million. And that's a tough pill to swallow. So what are we going to do here? We ended up not awarding that contract and reaching out to a different contractor after negotiations with the sole bidder didn't bear much fruit. These guys got contractors from 5 states to come in and help them. They worked 24 hours a day, 6 days a week. They had lights out there so they could work at night. You see the temporary bridge there. That's a little Lego style, is what I call it, bridge on the left. They built that thing in 71 days. And we had access restored. When we talked to the community there, they were very concerned about not having the bridge open before school. And I believe school was set to open on August 15th. And our guys and the contractors, they were certain that was impossible. And but we didn't tell anybody that. We said, okay, our goal is the 15th, and we just did everything we could, and we opened this thing 3 days before school started. And so it sort of exemplifies sort of the one of our accomplishments here. This company, Hawkins Construction out of Omaha, I mean a 4th generation Nebraska company, they did everything they could to try and serve that community, and we're sure proud of what they accomplished. And the other thing about this was the communities, the response that we got from towns and from the people. people don't always love their government. You know, we don't usually hear a lot of good stories. Nebraskans, you know, they're practical people generally. We've got people who understand the challenge, but they really came out and supported these projects and supported the DOT. I mean, folks that were bringing donuts every day out to the construction crews, you know, eager to just cheer them on, and that spirit that we saw from the communities really helped inspire the work. And I know we got done faster as a result of the love we saw from communities. And on most of these, we had, you know, ribbon cutting kinds of things where the high school band's there marching across the bridge, and just tons of grassroots kind of support that you just don't normally see. And so I think you can't count on that. You got to earn that piece, and you know, being able to step up and demonstrate to folks just what it means to us and how hard we're willing to work. I mean, the people of Nebraska really supported us. I think that as a result, the DOT is trusted maybe more than we were before. And, you know, it's one of those moments where you either deliver or you don't. And if you do, man, you're going to have the support of the people. And there's nothing more powerful than that when you're trying to think about the future of the organization and how to serve Nebraska better. So in that respect, we're in a very good place. I wanted to talk about a couple of challenges. You know, this one is probably the thing that you think about the most. You know, you need, in many cases, the need to get the bridge open now is the driving factor in everything. But that makes it difficult to know if, you know, you don't have time to do a long-term assessment. You don't have time to run a bunch of models and figure out, you know, is this channel going to move back? That example of the Spencer Dam, you know, is that thing even going to be built again? We don't have time. It's too important to get people moving again. And so that is a challenge for us. I feel that you know, I don't know how to solve that. I don't know what the answer is when the reality is you got 85 projects at one time and speed is the thing. So how do you make sure you don't build something back that's gonna be susceptible to this kind of event again? Is the event is this the new normal kind of thing? We can expect this sort of event to occur all the time, or is it really truly rare? We don't know, and yet we don't have time to sit back and assess that and do all the engineering we'd like to do, because you have to move fast, and that's what the people of the state expect. It's what they deserve. It's what they want, and so you got to get going. And you know, that the Spencer Dam piece. There are still questions today on whether that will be repaired. Who will own that in the future? Is the water where it is now, is that the new channel, or is it going to go back eventually if they rebuild the dam? And there's a lot of legal questions there, and we cannot wait to learn that. We have to go. And so we build a bridge over that new channel that, you know, there may be a time in the future where that's completely dry. Now you've got a bridge where it would be cheaper to have a road, but we don't have time to wait. And so this balancing of speed with the long-term planning is something that I think is a real challenge for us, and I don't have any good answers, you know, at this time on how we do it. But I think it's something that we are concerned with, and as we think about the future, we have to wonder about. The next one is the speed versus regulations. I mean, it's very easy to follow the rules when you got one bridge out. When you got 27 of them, and you're trying to get so many teams working at one time, it's a challenge. You know, there's many good regulations that help you though. We were able to negotiate contracts where normally low bid is the only way to go. That's very helpful. We're able to do the NEPA piece, the environmental piece, after the fact. So you do the work and you do NEPA later. Those are great regulations that help us. But I use this line a lot, and it's a little bit of a jab, but there's a lot of truth to it. We opened that bridge in 71 days. It's 10 months, and we're still working through paperwork to get reimbursed for it. And you know, that's kind of crazy when you think about it, that you can build a bridge that fast, but to push the paper takes months and months and even years. And it's holding up things. It's, you know, we're not can't get the paperwork done, so you can't get reimbursed from the federal government, which means it's holding up other projects. And it's a huge challenge for us down the line. And that matters when you talk about resiliency, because part of being resilient is to maintain our assets. And right now, some of our asset preservation projects are being held up because we can't get reimbursement fast enough. And it's not because lack of trying on folks. People understand what we're trying to do, but it's kind of crazy that here we are, going to be a year later and we still aren't getting the paperwork done when we're able to get those bridges open so fast. And so I think collectively as an industry, it's something we got to get serious about. We got to get the money flowing faster. The more these events occur, the more important it is. And an example, if you follow or know much about how the funding works, Federal Highway has an emergency relief pot of money, and they even have what's called quick release money. And within days of the event, we had been authorized $25 million in quick release money. But the money doesn't come to you, even though it's been released. You have to still fill out all the paperwork to get it out, and we still do not have all that $25 million today. And I don't see any reason when you got $127 million in damage, we know we're going to go flying over the $25 million mark, why that money, that quick release money, just isn't just sent over in cash or into our account right away, because it seems to me that's kind of the intent, yet the rules and the structure of it are such that that's not exactly how it works. And in some cases, when we're doing permanent repairs, the need, you have to go through a full-blown regular NEPA process ahead of time, low bid kind of thing. And there are some projects on the local side that won't be done until 2022 or even later. And I think there's probably some things we can do there to help understand whether or not that's the right way to do it. I would say, I mentioned how good Federal Highway, how responsive they were. We haven't seen that same level of urgency from all of our regulatory partners. I think, that's something that I would urge folks, when you've got an event like this, understanding the magnitude of it. And that's why, going out and seeing the citizens and hearing their stories, you really understand that just how important it is to act. And the regulatory piece is something we have to try to fit within there. And you can't be perfect when you do 85 projects all at one time. And so, setting up our regulations to be able to at least understand and support that is important. And generally, I think we've seen that, but I think there's a lot of opportunity still. I'll talk just a little bit about where we're headed now, and then if there are questions, I'd be happy to try and answer some. We are doing some lesson learned workshops. A couple outside facilitators come in and help us. A couple that we're doing on our own. Really focus on the data piece I mentioned earlier. How can we be better at collecting the data and sharing information? That's something that I think will always be difficult in an event like this, but something that we're striving to be able to do better. Even things like where to put our materials. Do we have people and materials and barricades and those sorts of things positioned in the right place so that we can respond quickly? Does everybody understand the flow of communication when it comes to reaching out to our operations center and all those things? Generally, the answer is yes, but I think we found that there were opportunities to improve communication there. We believe there probably are areas that are more susceptible to an event now because of levees and that were damaged and have not been repaired. And so we are doing some work with other agencies to try to understand where on our system are we maybe more susceptible than we usually would be. In an event like this, everything is susceptible, but if we get some isolated events this spring, we suspect there are sections of highway that normally would not be places of concern that now are, and so we're trying to understand that so that as we get into the spring, we can respond. And then the last thing I would just say, is that I cannot speak highly enough of the folks at the DOT. One thing I am absolutely certain of is if we have another event this spring and the weather is looking like it's possible that we will, or even likely, the one thing I know is that we will be there and we will respond, and that gives you comfort with the uncertainty of what may be ahead of us in the next couple months. Our people are ready; they're going to be there. We've got a lot of lessons learned from the past year that we'll be able to put into place, but no two events are the same. And the one thing I do know is that we've got folks who care deeply about this. They're experts in this, in response to these things, and they'll be ready to go. So very proud of the work that was done at DOT. And I think when you talk resiliency, for me, it's not just that sort of long-term planning of how do you build a more resilient system. It's how do you respond in the moment of truth, and how do you best serve the people and make decisions that will really make Nebraskans proud of their government and of the decisions that are being made. And I think we proved that this year. So, Tony, with that, that's what I have for prepared remarks, but I'm certainly willing to take questions if there are any.
No, fantastic. And I know, hey, folks, I know Bell put out there that, you can be the chat line. You can start typing your questions in there. So, Kyle, in the interim, I'll give you a few things I just thought about. You talked about them, but so where are you today? I mean, you're cleaning up the paperwork. You're trying to get reimbursed. You're probably tweaking processes. You're maybe upgrading or looking at plans that you could, tweak. So again, that's about resiliency, and resiliency has definite. So we're just, you talked about it, but we're just a couple snapshots. Where are you today, and what are you baking in now? What are you baking in going forward in terms of processes? Maybe additional hires, moving a bridge. I know you talked a little bit about it, but any other big ones that come to mind?
Yeah. Well, I think I'm looking forward to celebrating that last bridge being open here in a couple of days. So that's a big focus for us. I really want to celebrate that we've accomplished, got the whole system open. One place that we are looking is in our roadway design group, trying to understand where we had failures. Are there opportunities to tweak designs so that we can withstand a little bit more than we were able to this time? And that's something that, of course, is a very long-term look when you start trying to bake that into your projects a little bit more. I think the other big piece is just trying to understand how to make use of the data that we have, that we've collected out of this, and using GIS and other things to be able to map it and understand where we may be more vulnerable than we thought we were or would think if we didn't do the analysis. So those are a couple of the things, and then the paperwork piece. Trying to work with our regulatory friends at Federal Highway and the Corps of Engineers, Fish and Wildlife, those groups, to really look back and make sure what could we at DOT have done differently initially to better support the eventual reimbursement process. Certainly, there's a lot of things that our folks could probably improve, and both in their decision making and in sort of the documentation and those kinds of things. And so that is a major step for us, is to try to look back and understand how we can educate our own people, and how Federal Highway and others can better support us as we go forward. And we did great considering, but I think there's a lot of opportunity to improve. And when we talk about the length of the paperwork process, a lot of that can be improved if you make the right decisions up front. And we got 2,000 people that work at DOT. Most of those folks are out in districts. Most of those folks are the ones on the ground making decisions. And so trying to make sure they, as best you can, understand here's what you have to consider when you decide what you're going to do, and here's how it could affect reimbursement, either yes or no on it, or the timeline of it.
Perfect. And one more question, and I'm going to get to a chat line in a minute. And this is related but different, Kyle. I mean, I know you talked about data and managing in real time, and there's obviously an insatiable appetite for the public and the media to get real time information. But I'm going to talk about cyber a little bit, and that's going to be an upcoming resiliency topic for a seminar. But all those great things you're doing, your war room, et cetera, and your communication, which is critical here. You talked about it, but without cyber, a lot of those advancements can be compromised. So any thoughts on how to protect your networks? Of course, I don't want you to give trade secrets away out here, but because
sure,
cyber is critical, and any thoughts on how to protect that system?
Well, so I'll put that in for a DOT. I'll put that in a context for you, at least in how I've started to think about this. The transportation is changing. It's changing fast, and I suspect that no matter what industry you're in, you can say that. But it is very true in transportation. And in my career, I've done a lot of long-range plan kinds of stuff. And in the old days, you just kind of project traffic out, and you talk about how you're going to be more multimodal, and you make plans to do that. Now we're talking about things like self-driving cars and connected vehicles that are connected and talking to infrastructure. And we're talking about being able maintain and operate our system, every signal in the state right from our operations center, and preemption for snowplows. I mean, there's just so many things that are out there and available to us and that are coming at us. And cybersecurity is a big part of the concern there. And the challenge for us is we don't have expertise in that. We don't have expertise in a lot of the things I just described, whether it's data scientists or IT experts or, technology. I mean, we just don't have it at DOTs. We're not structured with our organization to be able to find those people, recruit those people, pay those people. And so we have got to evaluate our own structure to make sure we can welcome that and get that expertise. But the bigger thing, I believe, is we got to start developing partnerships with non-traditional folks. We have recently gone through a migration where a lot of our technology and network stuff is now managed under the office of the CIO at the state, as opposed to just our own network at DOT. That's been a big effort, and it's been a challenge because we're used to sort of being able to serve ourselves. But the truth is, we needed that because the security piece that can be provided by folks that are experts in that field is something that we need, and we can't afford to put ourselves in a position where we don't have that in place. And so, for me at the DOT, it's about recognizing the challenge, putting down your defenses, and realizing that maybe you can't solve this yourself, and you got to work with people who are experts in this field and develop the partnerships so that you can make smart decisions. And whether that's when to invest in a technology, do we need to put fiber along the roads in places where we don't have it, all the way to those security things. It's the partnership piece that's the key, and that part is not easy necessarily because you're used to DOTs. DOTs generally are used to making their own decisions on their own stuff all the time, and we've got to as DOTs realize that in the future that's going to be impossible if we're going to serve the people and the businesses of our states. And so we got to start making friends.
No, perfect. And I want to segue back into the chat question because it goes very nicely. Because obviously you're part of a Society of American Military Engineers presentation here, which is a partnership that you mentioned. I mean, this is a partner. SAME is a partnership between private industry and government, federal government, but has a lot of that capability that you mentioned. We got onto the cyber thing. So is there anything out there that you could see that you're thinking about going forward that we're going to use funding? And a lot of this comes down to funding, that we're going to use this funding. And I'm using Breck's question here, maybe taking it a little different slant to it, but anything that you could do that organizations, you said, of course, when an event happens, it's a little too late to start developing that partnership. So is there anything you're looking at, procurements coming down the road? Hey, we're going to look to upgrading our cybersecurity so we can get real-time information. You mentioned before drones from other folks were helping you get data. Is there stuff that the SAME community writ large, a lot of engineers, a lot of that expertise that you may not have, that, again, you may need funding from other folks to make it happen, but is there something on your big board out there that you're trying to, that where SAME can maybe partner with you guys, obviously when the sun is shining and not when the event is happening, if that makes sense? So kind of like how can we help you and help us kind of thing?
Well, so that's not a question I've thought much about. I think when I think of your organization, I think that there's probably expertise in areas outside of our influence that you may have, whether it's with the levee systems or others. I would expect that there are probably engineers in your organization who are working on that regulatory side who may have influence over some of the things I talked about in terms of, how do we bring as much common sense into this as possible? How do we make decisions that are founded in trying to solve problems and not trying to chase decimals on a form? And I think that philosophy is something that I think we as engineers we struggle with that sometimes because our training is such that we're there to work through the math and to meet the standards and to follow the regulations, and that's sort of how we're wired. It's sort of how we're trained all the way back through college. And I always, my degree is engineering, and I have a lot of respect for all that piece. But to be able to collectively, as an industry, decide that we're going to start with engineering, that those decisions that we make are going to be founded in good engineering, but we're going to sometimes let other factors influence our decisions and our course of action in a positive way. And you know, people lament politics, they lament people who don't understand traffic engineering, et cetera, et cetera. I welcome those kinds of things. I think that they help us make better decisions, and we need support from everybody to be able to respond to these kinds of things. And so, you know, for me, it's a lot of it is a philosophy that we as an industry need to preach. And you know, that means sometimes we got to let go a little bit and recognize that a solution may not be founded only in engineering. It's got to be it's got to bring in some other factors to it. And the standards are great; they provide that foundation for us. But let's not let that be the sole deciding factor sometimes, because it doesn't do us any good. It doesn't help us respond quickly, and we lose credibility as a result of it.
Tony, Kyle, this is Stephen. Can I make some comments, observation from the presentation? First of all, it was a great presentation, and I agree with everything you said about the pressure you have, the speed and regulation issue. We have 90,000 dams in USA.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering, is there any way we could have proactively done any repair on that dam? I saw the failure in the planks there. That my comment would be, no matter what we do now, there's nothing you can do. But peacetime, we have no disaster. We need to proactively see where we can fix before, because I mean, the disasters in America has been examples, and I can tell you, 2005 Katrina was a bad example that the local agency was crying out to get federal fund before Army Corps could finish the design. Army Corps wanted $20 million for his design. It was not funded. They spent $180 billion after the fact. What a disaster. 300,000 homes became uninhabitable. I'm actually chair of Resilience Ratings, Orange County Post in California, Orange County, California. And I really believe this is a great thing you have done with speed and everything. And you said about 70 days, finish the bridge, but then you have months to go get a regulation. So there's a problem. And my comment would be in here that to save anything, proper engineering, of course, but I think we need to do proactive move ahead of time. We will save time and money, 1,000 times, maybe. Well, Katrina we spent 9,100 times more money than the $20 million that was not funded to Army Corps. Army Corps knew how to do it. Unfortunately, it was not done. So I think really you got to get, DOT has to get a pat on the back. Great job, great job. And I have a lot more coming. I don't know we have time, but I think you hit the nail on the head. We need to have partnership ahead of time. Now, our plan is to have a list of expertise from our member. Like Tony said, how can SAME help? I think SAME can show you the list of companies we have on our team, and you could partner with them ahead of time, way ahead of time, prepare to see the regulation. In emergency, call them up to be ready. So we don't have to do the pre-negotiation, do whatever we have to do in emergency. You cannot write a contract ahead of time. So, and I don't know this could happen, but we need to get the folks involved, those who have been hurt already. So we need to get them a committee or something formed with the people with them, so they don't have to worry about so much regulation. So you get I don't know if we can get approval ahead of time from the state, federal. Maybe this is something you have to work ahead of time, not only for Nebraska, all of the states everywhere. It's just my quick comment.
No, thanks, Stephen. And certainly Kyle's name's up there, and my name is. I'm sure Kyle, you don't mind taking cards and letters and following up on your presentation.
No, not at all.
So yeah. So look, I'm going to turn it over. Thanks everybody. Thanks Stephen and Breck for your questions and comments. And let's. I'm going to turn it over to Belle for some closing comments and take it from there, Belle.
Oh, thanks so much, Tony. Okay, so registration for JTC is open. You could just go on the www.samejtc website and register for the conference. Before February 29th is the early bird. So as you can see, this is a list of the sessions that we culled from the call for presentation. To give everyone a heads up, we received 312 total presentations submittals, and we chose 53. In the resilience track alone, we received 67, with only the choice of choosing 7 slots. So as you can understand, it was a really arduous task for our review committee to actually make these choices. And basically, they broke it down into focus areas. And that way we could actually then create a well-rounded track. In addition to our tracks, we also will have a session. The Resilient COI will be led by Joe Manus, and he would like to discuss what's really going on for the future of SME efforts towards our 2025 strategic plan. Goal 2, if everyone's not aware, is a bid to sustain resilient communities. So all those discussions will be occurring at the JTC committee meeting. So with that said, I would love to just thank Tony, Carl, and Kelsey again. Thank you so much for your hard work in developing this presentation. On behalf of SAME, we want to express our appreciation to you and to everyone who participated today. We really hope that this webinar has been of value. The webinar was recorded and will be posted on our Resilient COI webpage and on the SME site along with the presentation. You will also receive a certificate of completion for your 1 PDH credit. It will be emailed to you in an editable form. This concludes today's webinar. You may now disconnect and please enjoy the rest of your day.